Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Red Tinted Glasses podcast. The tall ships may have sailed, but the next big event is soon coming to the big red city because Aberdeen are at home to Ipswich this Friday night. Yes, we'll be discussing the Dons' final pre-season game before the season kicks off. Amongst other things on the show, and try and catch up on the latest goings on from AB24. Phil, how's it going? Good to see you still proudly wearing that Scottish Cup t-shirt.
Yeah, I
And we
know.
made it to the £200 as well.
Yeah, good donations, and yeah, almost looks like I've not washed it. 'Cause I feel like I've worn it every episode that I've done since then. But yeah, preseason's all about testing lineups, so it's good to be trying a three at the back here.
Yeah, I know. Good to get minutes in everybody's legs on this episode. The full gang's back together, and in continuation with our support for Life Stars as well. They've got a auction out just now, which is with some prints from the Scottish Cup parade, helping them raise money, which we've already done through the Scottish Cup t-shirt. So for those watching, I've put the link in the comments and it'll be in the description of the video and the audio as well. So check that out. Some prints donated by Natalie Hood from the Scottish Cup parade. So a chance to get yourself there on them and help a local charity as well. And Calum, good to have you back again, 2 weeks in a row. Busy day for you today. Last day of the tall ships as well. Going from John Swinney to myself and Phil. This is a real test of his lag, Phil.
Callum's gone from bald First Minister to bald podcast host to slightly less bald co-host, all in the space of the day. Sensational.
Yeah.
It came up saying the page was unresponsive, but are we back?
We are back. Well, me and Phil are back. Calum's dodgy internet is back. That's
Is it
what happened.
working? Say, respond quickly. Respond back.
Yes, we're back, Calum.
Respond back as quickly as you can so we know if this is working. God, the joys of live.
It is the joys of live, isn't it, Calum? Right, Phil, I'll come to you whilst Calum sorts his issues out at this end. Something that is back at Aberdeen is Alfie Dorrington. He's come back on loan from Tottenham Hotspur. Myself and Calum spoke about, the defensive issues and whether Alfie may or may not return on the last episode. Surprising to see Alfie return?
I don't think surprised, really. Obviously, we spoke to him at Player of the Year, and he spoke quite highly of the sort of impact the club's had on his development and how important it is for him to have minutes. Obviously, a new manager in at Tottenham, maybe not saying doesn't rate him, but obviously hasn't had the same time with him as Ange Postecoglou had. So maybe not a surprise to see him coming back up this way. If he wasn't going to be part of the first team plans, and it's probably better coming to us with a little bit of European football than potentially a championship team, but he's maybe not going to have that same level of exposure.
And in terms of obviously the European aspect, I think is key, and obviously adds to the depth that we've got in defence, as John Kelo points out, now having 7 centre halves. Some people are going to comment on what that potentially means for Jack Milne's game time opportunity. Do you think it does affect Jack Milne? Myself and Calum spoke about him potentially being an option and cover for the right back area. We've seen Nicky Devlin so far in pre-season filling in the left back role, and with Guy Fami still out injured. So I don't necessarily see it as limiting Jack completely.
No, I don't think it does. I think Jack showed obviously in the cup final his quality. How good he is as a player. Whether that option of the three at the back becomes a little bit of a more permanent fixture in the side. Could we see that three at the back being the preferred option from Jimmy with Canuster, Dorrington now back as well, and Jack Milne at centre half? I think it'll be interesting. But like you said, I think he's versatile as well. The ability to go in at right back and into hold the midfield, and probably if you asked him to go up front, he'd probably just do it anyway. So, and I think it's good to have players like that around. We saw the benefit of the likes of Ross McCrory, who was able to kind of be that utility man. Obviously, as the season's going to be longer than last, with the European games included. I think he's a very handy player to keep around, and I don't think his minutes are going to be limited.
And I don't think it's necessarily bad to, have another centre back in the squad, as you've mentioned. We're going to be games coming thick and fast. And if we look back even to last season and the injury records that we had, and it wasn't just the amount of players, it was the length of time players were out for as well. We need to have enough cover in those areas to deal with not just the demands of the games, but demands physically as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I know that John sort of mentioned the 7 centre halves on the books. I don't really see it staying that way. We'll probably come to discuss that a little bit later on. But, I think that how often did we say the last European run, how our lack of depth really came back to bite us when it came to league form. And, when the games do get a little bit gritty, to be able to, have players that have still got a bit in the tank does become a big boost.
And do you think, Chris points out here that thinks we'll rotate the defence a lot with 2 games a week, since normally playing 90 minutes when they start, that we could almost see a league defence versus a European defence? You've already touched on the back 3 versus, a back 5. Shows maybe Jimmy's shaping up to have more of a plan B earlier in the season than we saw last.
Yeah, I think he'll definitely shape up to a plan B early doors. I think that's the main thing he's probably going to take from last season. Whether he's going to have a sort of cup and league defence, I'm not too sure whether we're in the position quality-wise to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And how often do we speak about the consistency between your sort of goalkeeper and your centre half pairing? But I do think the way he lines up is going to be a lot more situational. Like I've mentioned, the 3 at the back that played in the cup final. Really was the difference maker, really, just having those extra bodies back. So, whether we do see him in, if we get a sort of counter-attacking, quick, heavy offensive team in the Europa League playoff, he might go for that 3 at the back in the first leg just to make sure that the second leg stays competitive. So I think it'll be interesting to see sort of how we line up this season.
I think if we stay on the defensive side, then, as John pointed out, 7 centre halves, but he also points out we maybe need to look at shifting Jensen and Ruby, but that could prove more difficult. At the weekend, the Don's team went down to Fulham, lost 4-1, and an Aberdeen 11 went to North Lodge Park and lost 3-1 to Formartin, where Slobodan Rubezic was involved. And those that maybe followed Doric Dad on Instagram or social media might have seen, I think it was Paul Campbell's goal from the game of the weekend, where he just absolutely bullies Ruby before peeling off the defence and smashing the ball home. I mean, really poor defending all round. In terms of Richard Jensen, was noted as a trialist for the game at Turriff and then not involved this weekend. Do you think there is maybe a limited future for Richard Jensen and Slobodan Rubezic currently within this Aberdeen team?
Yeah, I think so. We've spoken about the 3 at the back. I don't know. Richard Jensen, I thought, was quite suited to that 3 at the back when he had to play there. But, over the past 2 seasons, you would probably think he's on his way out. The tail end of Ruby's season last year as well, Jimmy's a man for a clean slate, and I'm sure he's probably given that same message again this pre-season, that everybody's on that clean slate. But, with 7 centre halves, typically only playing 2 at a time, I could see us trimming that more, even just from a wage saving point of view.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that we might look at that. And I just wonder, when Jimmy spoke about leaders, if that game against Motherwell, where Ruby really lost the head, was almost the final nail in his Aberdeen coffin.
Yeah, I mean, it could well be. I mean, between the Motherwell game and that St Mirren game as well, where he got hooked, they're the 2 that kind of stick in the mind, where, maybe unfortunate, he was looking a lot better up to those points. I thought, early doors of the season, okay, yeah, still a bit of a bomb scare, but certainly showed signs of improvement. But I don't know if, as much as it pains me to say, that was maybe the peak that he was going to hit with us. And like I say, at the point in his career as well, I think we spoke about it a couple of episodes back when it came to pathways and player development. I don't think the club would probably want to stand in Rubezic's way if there was the opportunity for him to get those sort of first team minutes elsewhere, obviously with his prospects as a Montenegrin international.
Yeah, exactly. And I suppose that's going to depend if, for the likes of Rubezic, would you suspect it will be that's him gone or a loan move?
It's interesting. It's kind of hard to tell. I I would maybe like to see him go out on loan with maybe an option to buy, to maybe still keep that ace in our sleeve, so to say, where we could maybe offer him a new deal and nullify that option to buy, potentially if he does look like he's showing signs of improvement. But yeah, I feel like he's in that position where a lot of the fan base, I think, have kind of consigned themselves to him being off, and
Yeah.
that's never a good sign going into a new season.
Yeah, and I suppose as well with Gavin Malloy, coming back to fitness and seeing minutes already this season, both at Cove and then again at the weekend against Fulham, maybe suggests that Gavin's put himself up the pecking order, certainly higher than Ruby. But I suppose other kind of points from the defence as well is that still no minutes for Guy Fami at left back this weekend, or Christers Tobers as well. So, we spoke about players coming in last season and struggling without a pre-season, whether that be, you know, having too much, the likes of Nielsen and Toby Keskinen having already played before joining us. I just wonder how much of a setback, maybe more so Guy Fami at a left back might struggle with. At least Tobers has had a little bit of experience of the Scottish game so far.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you say, adapting to a new league is going to be tough. We kind of saw the impact as well that missing out on preseason for Dante Polvara. How long it took him to kind of get up to speed and up to fitness. Obviously, not quite sure of the extent of Gaifami's injury. I saw a few tweets sort of saying he was expecting to be back for the start of the season. Hopefully, maybe get to see a bit of him on Friday if he is up to fitness. Because, like I say, he is a player that I was actually quite looking forward to seeing this preseason, to kind of see what he's about. So yeah, hopefully not too long for him. But like you said, I think it's important that we do have the ability for Devlin, Jensen, Shinnie, even Gavin Malloy to be slotting in at left back if needed.
Yeah, and as Dave McLennan points out, Nicky Devlin after that game at Fulham pointing out that he was willing to swap sides at fullback if it means helping out the team, and I think it does say quite a lot that we have been seeing him at that left back side so far. I just wonder if it does mean that, as we've already kind of touched on, that Jack Milne might seem more of a right back option at this moment in time. So it's good to have strength and depth. Although I suppose we'll maybe come back and question that depending how the season starts and continues. One area that we're currently blessed with, I suppose, is wingers, and the futures of certain players within the squad do remain up in the air. One player that speculations continued this week is Vicente Bazawin, with rumours suggesting he may depart the club for HJK Helsinki, whether that be on loan or a permanent transfer. Again, another player not involved at the weekend against Fulham or for Martin, maybe indicating a move could be on the card shortly for Vinny.
Yeah, I mean, potentially. Again, he's in that unfortunate position where he has been hampered a bit by injury and a potential dip in form that did seem to get loaned out earlier on to the Netherlands. But I like Vinny. I think he's got a role to play. I thought against Cove when he came off the bench, he looked sharp. And the fact he was involved in that squad as opposed to the one that was sent off to, I think it was Turriff on that day. Maybe speaks a bit of volumes. The inclusion of him in a lot of the squad media as well. So I would be kind of sad to see Vinny go, because I feel like the injuries maybe haven't allowed us to see the best of him. And I think that early spell he had, showed the quality that he can produce if he's given that sort of opportunity to do so.
Yeah, and I don't know, it was maybe something that I would kind of maybe prefer him to see him off on a 6-month loan, because I suppose if it is a loan deal and he's moving over to Finland, that's not going to be for the entire of our league season anyway. So a loan maybe up until January, and then at least if our squad's a bit threadbare or you reevaluate. And certainly if the club are looking to sell it, they don't really have much room to sell him on. As you said, with his current injury record, so a 6-month loan might work in both parties' best interests. I guess, still kind of staying on the talk of the squad and transfers will be the fact that we're still searching for a striker. No rumours on that front. Everything seems kind of quiet. One positive, I guess you could say, is Kusini Yengi grabbing his first goal, giving the Dons the leads against Fulham. But I suppose for his own confidence, it's good to get a goal. And again, for those that weren't at Cove, I'm sure it'll be raring to see him on Friday night.
Yeah, he's an interesting player for me. Didn't catch too much of him at Cove because I was at the opposite end of the pitch, but I thought it was quite interesting that he seemed to come quite deep, I thought, and link the play, which wasn't the way I thought he was going to really be playing. And, from the sounds of the goal against Fulham as well, it was a high press where I think it was Tope won the ball back and Yengi scored. And that was against a strong Fulham side as well. So hopefully that gives him a little bit of confidence going into the season. But it's kind of hard to tell whether he's going to be the sort of main man this season. It's hard to judge off pre-season, obviously, and in the way that he was used at Portsmouth. So, I'm excited to see him against Ipswich. Maybe that sort of quality of opposition might suit him quite well to get a good benchmark.
Yeah, and as David McLennan also points out, he would like to see Dabag back. There's been some rumours that Aberdeen aren't, well, obviously at the kind of the end of last season, that we hadn't taken up the option to buy. I think that price actually went up due to the fact that Charleroi managed to activate another year in his contract. In terms of Dabag, if it kind of gets towards the end of the transfer window, would you be happy seeing him back? Would you actually be happy getting him in now, or other targets for you?
For me, I think it'd be other targets. I mean, thanks for the big goals and the memories. But again, for me, potentially we didn't see enough of him in his loan. But for me, he's not the answer. For the price we're probably going to pay for him, you're probably looking at the same sort of fee for Kevin Nisbet, with Millwall potentially wanting to get him off their books after signing their new £5 million striker. So, if it was a toss up between the two, you'd probably take Nisbet. I don't think either of them's the answer personally, but I would probably prefer to see Nisbet back out of the two of them.
Yeah, I think I would prefer to see Nisbet back out of the two of them as well. I do think there is a player in Dabag. I think potentially with the way that we're trying to work with Milanovic and Keskinen coming in off the wing, I do think it's potentially a system that Dabag could thrive in, based on absolutely nothing than just from what I saw last season. Just kind of that reminds me just like another predatory instinct in and around the box. I'm not going to say that he is an Adam Rooney type player, but just always seemed to find himself in the right place at the right time with, as you've said, some of the goals that he scored. Again, if we kind of look to the games that occurred at the weekend, Peter Ambrose finding himself in the game at Formartine, having not been involved the week before, can't be bothered suggesting that Ambrose will be going out on loan. Do you think, in fact, it could be more than a loan move and a permanent departure for Peter Ambrose, or do you think still currently a loan would suit him and there is a future here for him?
I think a loan would suit him. I mean, obviously the club's invested in him to a good degree. It was about 300,000, I think. So it seems like a bit of a disservice to kind of cut our losses so quickly. Like Sam's mentioned, that's exactly what I'd written down here was hopefully a little bit of the Pape and Dante success. If we can get the right move for Ambrose and have him come back as a more complete player. So yeah, definitely I would like to see him get a loan. And again, we're in that lucky position where our squad's not too bare bones, where it's a hindrance to be losing, players, even if it's on loan. So we can take that risk to sort of get him off the books and get him that experience.
Yeah, some also suggesting, why don't we just throw money at Simon Murray? I suppose given Dundee's start to the season, especially if they lose tonight to Bonnyrigg, it might be a little bit of a tempter to just try and pull them away. But I can't really kind of think of any targets that right now excite me in terms of a striker, and I'm sure folk would point to Simon Murray's age as being a negative right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's nobody that I would really point to. Again, obviously, I'm not a football agent either, so I've got no idea who's murmuring about wanting to get on the move, etc. But I've kind of said for a little bit now that around about that Tope-sized fee, around about that £1 million mark, I think on a striker would be ideal for us. It would give us that resale value at getting somebody at a good age, and hopefully someone a bit like Tope that can kind of hit the ground running, and be an impactful player right from the off.
Could it be Alfie Bavage's year? David McLennan asks. Again, Alfie on the score sheet at the weekend against Martin, hitting the woodwork on a couple of occasions as well. I think my only concern, if you want to put it that way, for Alfie is he hasn't been involved in the kind of full first team games. Esther obviously getting a chance this weekend, but I've been saying it for weeks. I still think that Alfie's going to end up not at the club come maybe the end of the month, if not August. As John points out, Cali want him back. Obviously, very successful loan for him there last season, and Cali very much building a squad to try and conquer League One and get themselves back into the Championship. And I have to say, I think that's probably where he'll end up if it's for 6 months or the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think that the important thing for Alfie is getting that next step. He struggled a little bit at Ayr to really sort of become a bit of a talisman for them. Obviously, had no bother with that at Cali in League One. So you'd like to think a Championship or even a lower end Premiership side would suit him in terms of just getting that experience and hopefully moulding him into a player that can come in and have that impact next season.
Yeah, and again, I suppose if Alfie doesn't get a chance or leaves without getting first team minutes, it'll be another question mark against the academy and what players are coming through, or what we've been doing for the last few years in those early DNA investment years. One player that we haven't spoken about in terms of transfer rumours, I've seen it being discussed in the comments by a few people, is Shayden Morris. Talks over the weekend linking him with a move to Luton. I think it was £600,000 I wrote down was the alleged bid from the Championship club, or they've gone down to League One now. I can't remember.
League One,
but,
yeah.
In terms of that sort of value, is that undervalue for Shayden Morris?
I think so, personally. I mean, obviously he's not signed a new deal yet, which obviously doesn't play in our favour. But, when you look at the impact he had last season, Luton will have just got another big parachute payment for getting relegated, so they've got the money. You'd be saying over that £1 million mark, in my opinion, for Morris. Potentially doubling. 1.2, 1.5 would probably be where I would hope we would get. Because I mean, he's still a young player, and there's still a lot of upside with him. And with the way that Luton like to play a little bit on the break, with sort of real pace out wide, he would be a really key player for them. And the money that they've got for Asselgaard as well, that's gone to Rangers, I believe that's meant to be in around about the £3 million mark. They've obviously got the cash to spend, and it's a good investment for them, really.
And where do you stand on this in terms of a move for Shayden Morris? Let's say, hypothetically it goes through. David McLennan suggesting it's a step backwards, given the fact that there's European football currently at Aberdeen. He's from the London area, so it's a move closer to his family. They're still getting good money, so I'm sure he'll more than double his wages if he moves to Luton. I think, kind of hearing you say that almost getting 1.5 million, I think it's crazy to think we'll get 1.5 million for Shayden Morris. I'll honestly be so surprised, because I think if we can get to close to $1 million, we should be biting teams' hands off. And look, I'm not saying get rid of Shayden Morris, because that's what we need to do. As you said, he's not signed a new contract yet. he'll then become an option to leave for free in January. But if you're getting £1 million for a player that is effectively an impact sub, I think that's a good bit of business. And this is where I'm struggling to see why folk are valuing him as high as you are, Phil, at that 1.5 million, because he's not a player that starts week in, week out. I suppose maybe you're viewing that down to the impact and the goals and assists he can bring.
Yeah, I mean, potentially. I mean, you look at his stats from last season across all competitions, 17 goals and assists. You know, it's a big hole to fill, regardless of whether he's coming off the bench or not. You know, and if he's going into Luton to be a starter, I don't see why they wouldn't, you know, spend that level of money. Again, like I say, it's a good investment for him, for them at the age that he's at. You know, still only 23, in a player that could be, you know, molded into a perfect winger that could, you know, really still be their starting winger in the Championship as well.
Mm-hmm. I guess it's just whether he wants to move closer to home. Where I do think the lure of European football probably persuades him more to stay. It just depends whether Luton or any other club, I suppose, from down south are prepared to meet the valuation of any of our players at this point. And I think it then goes back to the point that Alan Burrows made last season when the whole Miovski departure was being touted, is that we're not going to lose a player for the sake of losing it. They have to, if anyone wants our players, they have to meet the valuation.
Yeah, and I think that's the way it's got to be. You know, like Sam's put in the comments there, a player's worth however much a club's willing to pay for him. You know, obviously, if someone comes in with a ridiculous offer, we're not gonna stand in their way. But at the same time, you know, I think the club's got every right to stand their ground and value players at, you know, what they value them at. I mean, that's what Celtic's done for years, and that's the reason they've managed to stay so dominant, because, you know, they do put their high values on their players and they don't budge on them. You know, I'm not saying we should be selling Shada Morris for 20 million like Nicholas Kuhn's gone to Italy, but you know, he is a player that, you know, should command a reasonable fee, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, it'll be one to watch in terms of the striking position. Then, as we kind of look towards Friday's final preseason game, if we are to get a striker, whether that be our main starting striker for the season, someone to support Yengi, is it important to have them in by Friday, or do you think this is kind of going to be one that drags out right up until deadline day?
I think it could be one that drags out, and I think that's purely just because the club's going to want to make sure it's the right man. You know, it's such an important position in football. You can't afford to, you know, make mistakes and get the wrong man in. You know, saying that again, like I've said already, we could already have that right man in Kasuni Yengi. You know, obviously being given the number 9 shirt during pre-season, whether that's subject to change come league registration. He could get a 99 like good old Christian did upon Miovski's arrival. So I think it'll be interesting. Like I say, I think Ipswich will be a good sort of benchmark to see, you know, obviously if Yengi does start, you know, does that maybe speak volumes for the pecking order between himself and Esther Sockler?
Yeah.
You know, does Pape go back into that sort of striker's role potentially? You know, obviously Milanovic and Tope looking like the most likely wing options, perhaps. You know, and then the likes of Clarkson and Ashish, you know, maybe taking that spot in the 10. I think Friday will be a really interesting benchmark for what Jimmy potentially views as his strongest squad at the moment.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of interesting to kind of say that, because one of the points you made there is so important to get that position right. But I almost feel that is such an important position to get right, 100%. But do we have it right just now? And are we selling ourselves a bit short, given Yengi and Sockler's injury record and how Pierre Ambrose has been so far? Then that puts the pressure on Pape or Fletcher. So personally, I feel we're a bit short in that area, just with a lot of unproven facts, I guess, around those players. But as Chris points out, maybe the reality is we can't afford a proven goal scorer. Miolski was unproven when we signed him. And I guess on that, I suppose if you're trying to sign a proven striker, we're not going to be the only club trying to do that. And it'll be up to the player where they want to go.
Yeah, like I say, it's such an important position, and every team wants a good striker. Like I say, it's not the backbone of your team, but it's a damn important part of it. If you can't score, then you're not going to win. So, to go all Michael Owen on you, but I think the difference between when we brought Miovski in and now is we were still kind of in that sort of phase of rebuilding and trying to establish a squad based on that player trading model. Whereas now it is more about kicking on next season a little bit, about maybe trying to get out the group stages in Europe, trying to put on another cup win, perhaps trying to, reclaim third or maybe even split the old firm. Who knows? It's all about kicking on. And I think you do need to sign players of that caliber to allow yourself to do that.
Yeah, good to see. Even though Calum's Wi-Fi is shit the bed, his optimism still remains in this podcast in some form.
One of us has to.
Yeah, with suggestions like that. But I suppose Sam Gordon also makes a good point. If we look back to the start of last season, he says goals came from everywhere. If that's Jimmy's intention and philosophy, is a number 9 so critical when you have bags of talent out wide and in the number 10? So do you think that is maybe Jimmy's philosophy, is to rely on goals from all areas of that front three?
Yeah, I think, rely is maybe a strong word, but to have that expectation that they can come from it. I think the signing of Milanovic is kind of testament to that. A winger that loves a shot, had a good goal record in Australia. Similar with Tope, another player that likes a shot and kind of gives us that kind of dual threat of a winger that can hit the byline and cut inside. And again, Friday, I'm going to use it again as the benchmark. Does he put Pape in that 10? Is that the statement he makes to almost effectively have that 2 up top in a sense? With Pape floating around as he often does. So, maybe the number 9's not as important, as Sam says. But I'm still a sucker for a good 9 that can score a goal. I'm always going to be a sucker for a good 9 that can score a goal.
Yeah, I've just got this image of Pape now floating about the football pitch, just causing havoc as he tends to do. Looking ahead then to that game on Friday night, looks like it's actually set to be quite a good crowd at Pittodrie, judging by ticket sales. I'm sure the fact that the majority could claim a free ticket if they hadn't claimed a refund during the COVID season helps to that factor as well. What do you kind of expect from this game? More of an indication of our shape going into the opening game against Hearts? Maybe a bit of an increased intensity than we certainly saw at Cove?
Yeah, I think so. Like I've said already, I think it'll be a sort of benchmark to what Jimmy views as currently his strongest team that he has. And I think that I would like to think the team that starts the game is, most sort of similar to how we're going to sort of be going forward, especially looking into the sort of Hearts game. Hopefully, like I say, Yengi gets a good showing, because like I say, I'd like to see a little bit more of him and sort of try and understand his game a bit more. And like I say, Gyamfi back, hopefully, if he's fit enough, gets a little run out. But yeah, I think it'll be really interesting, the Aluko and Burns derby, to kind of see where we're placed going into the game against Hearts.
Yeah, and you've mentioned a point that I was going to kind of come on to as well, is how much do you feel that the starting 11 on Friday night may be very much the starting 11 as we head to Tynecastle? Of course, great to see the away end for that selling out in less than 24 hours as well. So good to see Don's away ends sold out, are back already. But and on that, how much, if that starting 11 is an indication to Monday night's game, that we maybe don't make the usual changing 6-7 players at halftime on Friday night like you tend to see in pre-season games?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it'll be a 1-to-1 squad for the game against Hearts. I think, he potentially doesn't want to show his hand too early. So I think it'll be like I said, I think it's probably more about the shape and the intensity of the squad, really. And I think there's obviously a lot of time between now and the 4th of August for potential new faces to come in again. Whether any will be sat in the crowd to get the lowdown on their new team will also be interesting. If anyone's eagle-eyed enough across in the main stand potentially. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting. Whether, again, it's always hard with friendlies because they could go one way or the other. I can see it, probably not being the same sort of halftime changes. I can see players getting a longer run out than they would, and I think it's a good level of opposition. The Fulham 4-1 game may be an anomaly. Fulham played a really strong squad. I would have probably expected most teams to get done in by Fulham. And also as well, probably more for us to kind of let them have that that run out, because that is early doors for Fulham. So we maybe didn't have it at the same intensity as we normally would. But yeah, I think the main thing for me is players get the minutes in and they get the confidence. And I think it'll be a good level of opposition to test us at that.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, maybe some new players in and around watching, of course. Some other new things that we're going to see at Pittodrie is, of course, the big screen in action for the first time. Hopefully there's not a Coldplay cam during the halftime entertainment that might catch any unsuspecting people out during the game. But I'm interested to see how that looks. I've moved over to the main stand for this game, given it's a pre-season friendly. So yeah, interesting to see kind of how Pittodrie is looking. It's always nice to go back, and the pitch will, I'm sure, be in excellent condition as well. You mentioned their confidence, Phil. JP put a comment of similar nature about that we could do a confidence building result before the league starts after the 4-1 loss to Fulham. To us, I'm not kind of getting caught up on the fact that we lost 4-1 to Fulham. As you mentioned, it was a very strong Fulham side. It was at 11th they finished in the Premiership last season. A very respectable manager and a very strong team as well. And if it sounds very cliche, but pre-season's not really about results. It is, as you've already alluded to, minutes in the legs. But given we're at home and given it is the last pre-season game, is there areas that we will be looking for confidence, whether that be another goal for Yengi, a clean sheet for the defence? The result probably doesn't feel the be-all and end-all.
No, like you said, I think the main thing for me is, if Yengi is the starting striker on Friday night, that he's able to get himself on the score sheet. And I think really for me, it's that tidiness in the midfield. Ipswich are obviously going to come and they're going to have that intensity of a team that, has Premier League quality players amongst it. Should they be starting? Who knows? But, they are a good side. They've got a good manager. They play good football. So for me, it's that sort of intensity and how the midfield copes with the press, retaining the ball. Can they break down Ipswich as well? So I think that's the main aspects for me. Defensively, a clean sheet would be nice, but a bit of a rarity in a pre-season game. It's a bit like an NBA All-Star game. The floodgates, may be open every now and again, just for the attack and focus there tends to be during pre-season. So yeah, for me, it's mainly top end of the pitch I'm looking at.
Yeah, and I agree. I think top end of the pitch, it's not maybe necessarily goals for Yengi as well, but it's how he links up with both Topi and Milanovic if those two start. And as you say, maybe how the midfield connects. Certainly something that stuck out for me at Cove was Leighton Clarkson's range of passing out to the wingers, and see if that continues as well. And I think it's one final opportunity to develop the partnerships and the link-ups before the real competitive action starts. So, as much as you're right to say it's going to be a quality test, I'm not going to sit here and be absolutely fuming if we're walking away from Pittodrie having gotten beat 4-0, but I think it also is testament to the fact that we're playing two Premiership sides, or obviously one former in Ipswich. Given the fact that we've got European football, will by all accounts have a very testing Europa League playoff game at the end of August. We're coming up against some quality opposition in pre-season, and fingers crossed, regardless of the results, stands us in good stead when it comes to those big games when it matters most.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. We've got a lot of, high pressure, difficult games coming up to start off our league campaign as well. Obviously, the Dundee United game's now being postponed as we kind of thought it might be. But yeah, like you say, that tough European playoff, sort of towards the end of August, and then Hearts and Celtic. We need to try and get ourselves to as close to that sort of match sharpness and match intensity as we possibly can. I think the friendlies have been picked, I think, quite smartly to allow us to kind of build up to that.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. So I'm sure those that are going to be in attendance on Friday will be very much looking forward to getting back to Pittodrie, seeing the Dons in action, possibly for the first time this season. I know I certainly am. There's always something special about Friday night football, regardless if it's pre-season as well. So we'll be back next week, rounding up the end of pre-season and also taking a look ahead. Of course, as the season returns in full, the Dons heading to Tynecastle with, as we've already said, a sold-out away end as well. So thank you very much to everybody that has joined us here on the episode tonight. Really appreciate the continued support as always, whether that be by purchasing Scottish Cup winning t-shirt, supporting us here on the channel, liking, subscribing, following us on audio, or as we've said in the comments as well, the Life Stars auction for Scottish Cup Parade prints as well. So until next time, thank you very much for tuning in. We will see you then.